For a long moment, Vexthor stood silent. Then slowly he lowered his weapon. "I surrender," he said. "Sir." Korthpur, when Yuna woke from the simulation, she was lying on a medical bed in the Academy's recovery room. Her team was in beds nearby, all of them slowly coming back to consciousness. The simulation had lasted 6 days in accelerated time, but only 12 hours had passed in reality. Still, her body felt like she'd actually spent a week running through a jungle. "You're awake," a medical officer said, checking her vitals. "How do you feel?" "Tired," Yuna admitted. Did we really win?" The medical officer, a kind-looking alien with blue skin, smiled. "You really won. The whole academy is talking about it, though I don't think talking is quite the right word, more like arguing loudly." As Yuna sat up slowly, she could hear the commotion outside. Raised voices, heated debates, the sound of hundreds of cadets and instructors all trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Her team woke one by one. Hyun groaned and pushed his glasses up. Jisoo looked around in confusion. Minho immediately checked his hands as if making sure they were real. Somin just lay there smiling like she couldn't quite believe they were alive. "We did it," Hyun whispered. "We actually did it." "I can't believe Vexthor surrendered," Jisoo said softly. "I can," Minho said. "We had him completely trapped. He's smart enough to know when he's beaten." The door opened and Commander Doyen entered. His face was carefully neutral, but Yuna could see pride in his eyes. "Cadets," he said formally, "you're being summoned to Commandant Ralvex's office. All of you. Get dressed and come immediately." They changed into fresh uniforms and followed Doyen through corridors that suddenly went silent as they passed. Other cadets stared at them with expressions ranging from awe to disbelief to anger. Crick stepped out of their way, his insectoid face unreadable. "This isn't over," he said as they passed, but he didn't sound threatening. He sounded uncertain. The Commandant's office was packed. Ralvex sat behind his desk, all three eyes blinking rapidly. General Vexthor stood to one side with his remaining officers, their expressions hard. Several academy instructors lined the walls, and a communication screen showed several members of the Galactic Coalition Council watching remotely. Yuna and her team stood at attention in the center of the room. "This," Ralvex began, "has become a significant situation. Cadet Yuna, your team's victory in the simulation is unprecedented. However, General Vexthor has filed a formal complaint." Yuna's heart sank. "Sir?" Vexthor stepped forward. "I am disputing the results of the simulation. I believe there were irregularities." "What kind of irregularities?" Ralvex asked carefully. "The human team did not follow standard military protocols," Vexthor said. His voice was controlled, but anger simmered beneath it. "They used deception, sabotage, psychological warfare, and unconventional tactics that border on dishonorable." "Did they break any rules?" Ralvex asked. "No, but did they violate any simulation parameters?" "Not technically, however." "Then what exactly is your complaint, General?" This came from the communication screen. A council member, an elderly alien named Torval, was leaning forward with interest. "It sounds like the humans simply fought in a way you didn't expect." "They didn't fight at all." One of Vexthor's officers burst out. "They hid, they ran. They used tricks and games instead of honest combat." "They won," Commander Doyen said quietly. "That was the objective. Not to fight honorably. To win." The room erupted into argument. Half the instructors agreed with Vexthor. This wasn't proper military conduct. The other half pointed out that no rules had been broken. On the communication screen, the council members debated among themselves. Throughout it all, Yuna stood silent. She felt hollowed out. They'd won, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like she'd just made everything worse. Finally, Ralvex raised a hand for silence. "Enough! This debate is pointless." The simulation's purpose was to determine the effectiveness of different tactical approaches. The humans proved their approach was effective. That should be the end of it. "Is it effective?" another council member asked. "Or was this a fluke? One simulation proves nothing." "I agree," Vexthor said. "I request a rematch. Double the teams. Different parameters. Let's see if they can repeat this performance." "No," Yuna said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. "No?" Vexthor repeated. Yuna met his gaze. "General, you wanted to prove human tactics were primitive. We showed they weren't. Doing it again won't change anything. You'll just study what we did and counter it. That's not the point." "Then what is the point, Cadet?" Torval asked from the screen. Yuna took a deep breath. The point is that every species fights differently because every species survived differently. Your people, General, evolved as apex predators. You're built for direct confrontation. That shaped your military doctrine. But humans? We weren't apex predators. We were prey that learned to think. We survived ice ages, predators, diseases, and each other by being adaptable. That shaped our tactics. She looked around the room. You called us primitive. Maybe we are. But primitive doesn't mean ineffective. It means we use methods that have kept us alive for hundreds of thousands of years. Hiding isn't cowardice, it's survival. Tricks aren't dishonorable, they're adaptation. And winning by any means necessary isn't something to apologize for. The room was silent. Our tactics aren't better than yours, Una continued. They're just different. And maybe instead of arguing about which approach is more honorable, we should recognize that the galaxy needs both. Because someday we might face an enemy that can't be beaten by strength alone. And when that day comes, you'll want humans on your side. Torval was nodding slowly. The cadet makes a compelling point. The coalition's strength has always been diversity, different species bringing different capabilities. This isn't about capabilities, Vexthor said, but his voice had lost its anger. This is about... I don't know what this is about anymore. He looked at Una for a long moment, and something complex passed across his face. Frustration, confusion, and beneath it all, grudging respect. I withdraw my complaint, he said finally. The humans won fairly by the rules as stated. I was simply unprepared for their methods. Ralvex blinked all three eyes in surprise. General, are you certain? Yes, Vexthor turned to his officers. We lost because we expected a traditional battle. The fault is mine for not anticipating alternative approaches. He looked back at Una. Though I maintain that your tactics are distasteful. I don't care if they're distasteful, Una said bluntly. I care if they work. A sound came from Vexthor that might have been a laugh. Fair enough, Cadet. Fair enough. Over the next few days, the Academy remained in turmoil. News of the simulation spread throughout the coalition. Reactions were mixed. Some species praised the human cadets. Others were disturbed by their methods. The Drannith Empire officially protested that humanity was corrupting traditional military values. But something else was happening too. Cadets started asking questions, not just about the simulation but about warfare itself. What was the purpose of honor if you were dead? What good were traditional tactics if they didn't adapt to new threats? Why had the coalition military doctrine remained essentially unchanged for thousands of years? Una found herself both celebrated and isolated. Some cadets treated her like a hero. Others avoided her like she carried a disease. Her human classmates were torn between pride and worry about what this meant for Earth's reputation. The strangest development was Vexthor himself. Instead of leaving the Academy in disgrace, he remained. He requested access to Earth's military archives. He studied human history, warfare, and tactics with the intensity of an obsession. One evening, 2 weeks after the simulation, he found Una in the library where she was studying for an upcoming exam. She looked up to find him standing over her, his massive form casting a shadow across her desk. General, she said, uncertain. Cadet. He gestured to the empty seat across from her. May I? She nodded and he sat. For a moment he said nothing, just looked at the books and tablets spread across her desk. I've been reading about your planet's wars, he finally said. The ones you fought among yourselves before you reached space. We're not proud of all of it, Una said quietly. No, I imagine not. But what strikes me isn't the brutality. Every species has been brutal. What strikes me is the pattern. He pulled up a holographic display. Every major conflict in your history shows the same thing. The larger, stronger force expects to win quickly. The smaller force refuses to fight that way. And more often than not, the smaller force wins or at least survives long enough to matter. Una didn't know what to say to that. You called your people survivors, Vexthor continued. I'm beginning to understand what that means. It's not just about living through danger. It's about refusing to accept that the danger defines the terms of engagement. Is that why you stayed? Una asked. To understand us? I stayed because you broke something in me, Vexthor said bluntly. My certainty. My understanding of what warfare means. 40 systems I've conquered, and I never once questioned whether my methods were the only valid ones. He looked at her. You were right. My tactics aren't better than yours. Just different. And I need to understand the difference. He stood to leave, then paused. The Coalition Council is meeting tomorrow. They'll discuss. The sixth day dawned with heavy fog rolling through the jungle. Visibility was almost zero, and Vexthor's remaining 12 warriors huddled together, trying to maintain some sense of order. They'd abandoned the flag entirely, focusing all their energy on hunting down the humans who had tormented them for nearly a week. In the observation deck, the watching crowd had grown silent. What was supposed to be an easy victory had turned into something else entirely, something uncomfortable. The alien cadets watched as professional warriors jumped at every sound, argued over strategy, and slowly fell apart. "This isn't warfare," Crick said, his voice uncertain. I don't know what this is." "It's human warfare," Commander Doyen said quietly from where he stood. "This is what we do when we can't win by strength alone." Down in the simulation, Una reviewed the plan one more time with her team. They'd spent all night preparing for this moment. The trap was set. Now they just needed the Dranith to walk into it. "Jisoo, are you ready with the communications?" Jisoo nodded, her fingers poised over her equipment. She was still scared, but after 6 days of successfully evading trained warriors, her confidence had grown. "Minho, the devices. Armed and positioned," Minho confirmed, showing her the remote trigger he'd built. His hands were steady. "Hyun, the route?" "Mapped and confirmed. If they follow the pattern, they'll end up exactly where we want them." Hyun's tactical predictions had been perfect so far. "So Min?" The medic looked at Una with an expression that was equal parts fear and determination. "Ready to do my part." "Okay," Una took a deep breath. "Remember, we're not trying to kill them. We're trying to win. There's a difference. Let's go." The first part of the plan was to make themselves visible. After 6 days of hiding, Jisoo sent out a strong, clear communication signal. It was obvious and intentional, practically screaming their location to anyone listening. In the Dranith camp, a warrior's scanner lit up. "Sir, I found them." Strong signal approximately 2 kilometers north. Vexthor's eyes narrowed. After 6 days of radio silence, they suddenly broadcast their position. He thought about it for a moment. "It's a trap." "Of course it's a trap," another warrior said. "But what choice do we have? We can't let them win by default." Vexthor looked at his exhausted, frustrated warriors. They were hungry for a real fight, tired of chasing shadows, and he realized that the humans had manipulated them perfectly. Even knowing it was a trap, they had to spring it. Otherwise, they'd spend another 6 days being slowly picked apart. "All warriors move out," he ordered. "Stay alert. Whatever they've planned, we go through it, not around it. We end this today." The 12 Dranith warriors moved through the jungle in a tight formation. They were cautious but determined, weapons ready, scanning constantly. They followed the signal directly, refusing to be led astray by false trails or distractions. Una watched them approach through Minho's hidden cameras. "They're coming straight at us. No deviations." Vexthor figured it out. "Does that ruin the plan?" Salman asked nervously. "No," Una said. "It just means they know they're walking into a trap. But they don't know what kind of trap, and that's enough." The signal led the warriors to a narrow canyon, a natural choke point where the jungle gave way to rocky terrain. Steep walls rose on either side, and the only way through was a path barely wide enough for 3 warriors to walk abreast. Vexthor stopped at the entrance, studying it carefully. "This is where they want us. This is where they'll attack, so what do we do?" Korth asked. "We go through," Vexthor decided. "But we go through ready for anything. Shields up, weapons hot. The moment you see a human, you fire." They entered the canyon in formation, moving slowly and deliberately. Every warrior's finger was on their trigger. They expected an ambush from above. They expected explosives. They expected a coordinated attack. What they didn't expect was nothing. They walked the entire length of the canyon without a single incident. No attacks, no traps, no humans. On the other side, the signal continued, leading them deeper into the jungle toward a clearing ahead. "Where are they?" a warrior muttered. "Quiet," Vexthor snapped. But he was confused too. The canyon would have been perfect for an ambush. Why waste it? The answer became clear as they entered the clearing. The communication signal was coming from a small device sitting on a rock in the center of the space. "Just the device. No humans, it's a decoy," Korth said angrily. "They led us here for nothing." But Vexthor was thinking deeper. He looked around the clearing at the jungle surrounding them, at the terrain they'd just crossed. No, they led us here for a reason. Warriors, fall back. Return to one. That's when the first device detonated. It wasn't an explosive that could hurt them. It was one of Minho's creations, a concussion device that released a massive burst of sound and light. Blinding, deafening, disorienting. Before the warriors could recover, more devices triggered. Smoke filled the clearing. Their communication system went haywire with interference. Their sensors showed targets everywhere and nowhere. Defensive formation. Vexthor shouted, but his voice was lost in the chaos, and then the real attack began. But it wasn't what they expected. There were no energy blasts, no direct combat. Instead, Hyun's carefully placed traps activated. Simple things. Tripwires that sent warriors stumbling, loose rocks that made footing unstable, vines that tangled weapons and armor. In the confusion, Soman darted through the smoke fast and low. She wasn't trying to hurt anyone. She was tagging them with a compound she'd developed, a substance that would disrupt their armor's shielding system for exactly 30 seconds. Jisu's hack went live, taking control of the warriors' own sensor systems and feeding them false information. Half of them thought they were being attacked from the north. The other half thought the attack was coming from the south. They almost started firing at each other, and through it all, Minho's drones moved, not attacking but herding, pushing the warriors apart, separating them, breaking their formation. In 5 minutes. What had been a cohesive military unit became 12 individuals, scattered and confused, unable to coordinate with each other. Yuna watched from her hidden position, her heart pounding. Now, Hyun! Hyun triggered the final part of the trap. More devices activated, but these didn't explode or blind. They broadcast sound, recorded voices. The warriors' own voices captured over the past 6 days through Jisu's monitoring. Orders, reports, personal conversations. All mixed together and played back at random, making it impossible to tell what was real and what was recorded. I can't see. Where's the general? I'm hit. Fall back. Stand your ground. It's not real. It's not. One by one, the warriors panicked. Some ran directly into Minho's physical traps and were eliminated. Some were tagged by Soman so many times that their armor failed completely and they had to withdraw. Some simply made mistakes in the chaos, eliminated by their own confusion. In the observation deck, the watching crowd was absolutely silent. They were witnessing something they'd never seen before, an elite military unit being systematically dismantled without a single direct confrontation. Within 15 minutes, only 3 warriors remained, Vexthor and 2 of his officers. They'd managed to group together and were retreating toward the canyon, trying to re-establish control. This is insane, one officer gasped. How are 5 cadets doing this? Because they were never trying to fight us, Vexthor said, and there was something like respect in his voice. They were trying to confuse us, and we let them. They made it back to the canyon, but that's when they discovered the real trap. While they'd been dealing with the chaos in the clearing, Yuna had circled around them. She was now standing at the entrance to the canyon alone. She looked tiny compared to the 3 massive Drannith warriors. Her weapon wasn't even raised. She just stood there, blocking their escape route. Vexthor stared at her. 1 cadet against 3 warriors. This is your final stand? Yuna smiled, and it wasn't a friendly smile. No, General. This is your final lesson. You're trapped in a canyon with unstable walls. My teammate has been planting devices all around you for the past 10 minutes. I have a trigger in my pocket that could bring this whole area down. You're exhausted, confused, and down to 3 warriors out of 20. She took a step forward. You can try to fight your way past me. Maybe you'll win. But the simulation will register it as a mutual elimination at best, or, she paused. You can surrender. Surrender? Korth snarled. To a human cadet, never. But Vexthor raised a hand to stop him. He looked at Yuna with his amber eyes, really seeing her for the first time. He saw the exhaustion in her face, the determination, the absolute refusal to quit. He thought about the past 6 days, about how these 5 unlikely cadets had taken apart his entire unit using nothing but patience, creativity, and an intimate understanding of their own weaknesses. You've been leading us here from the beginning, he said slowly. Every retreat, every distraction, every trick. All of it was to get us to this exact spot. Yes, Yuna said simply. We never had a chance, did we? You had every chance, General. You were stronger, better trained, better equipped. You had every advantage except one. And what was that? Yuna's expression softened slightly. You expected a war. We gave you survival. You can't win a fight against someone who refuses to fight your way. The simulation chamber was the size of a football stadium, with walls that could project any environment imaginable. Hundreds of cadets and instructors filled the observation deck above, their faces pressed against the glass. The betting pools had closed an hour ago. Yuna's team had received exactly 17 bets in their favor, and 15 of those were from humans. Yuna stood with her team in the preparation room, each of them wearing the neural interface suits that would make the simulation feel completely real. Pain, exhaustion, hunger, everything would feel authentic. The only difference was that when someone got killed in the simulation, they would simply wake up outside instead of actually dying. Remember the plan, Yuna said quietly, checking her equipment one final time. We don't engage directly. We survive first, then we adapt. Jisu's hands were shaking as she adjusted her communication gear. Somin was triple-checking her medical supplies. Hyun was reviewing tactical maps on his tablet. And Minho was loading his pack with the various tools and components he'd spent all week preparing. In the other preparation room, Vexthor's 20 warriors stood ready. They wore full combat armor and carried weapons that would be translated into the simulation as energy rifles and plasma blades. They looked like an army. Yuna's team looked like scared students. Commandant Ralvex's voice came through the speakers. Both teams prepare for insertion. The scenario is as follows. Hostile jungle planet, extreme weather conditions, limited visibility. Each team starts at opposite ends of the map. The objective is a flag located in the center. First team to capture the flag and return it to their starting zone wins. Eliminations are permanent. Once you're out, you're out. Simulation begins in 60 seconds. Yuna closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. When you're afraid, use it. Fear makes you careful. Careful keeps you alive. 30 seconds. Whatever happens, Yuna said to her team, I'm proud to fight with you. 10 seconds. The world dissolved around them. When Yuna opened her eyes, she was standing in a jungle so dense she could barely see 5 feet ahead. The air was hot and humid, and something howled in the distance. Rain pounded down through the canopy, turning the ground to mud. Her team materialized around her looking disoriented. Move, Yuna whispered urgently. Away from the start point now. They stumbled through the jungle, moving as quietly as they could. Behind them, they could hear nothing but rain and wind. Yuna knew that Vexthor's warriors would be advancing in formation, probably already heading toward the center flag. They would expect the humans to do the same. That's why Yuna had no intention of going anywhere near the flag. Not yet. After an hour of careful movement, they found what Minho had been looking for, a small cave system, partially hidden by vegetation. They slipped inside, and Jisu immediately set up her equipment to scan for enemy communications. They're moving in standard coalition formation, Hyun whispered, studying the data. 3 groups of 6 with 2 scouts ranging ahead. They're heading straight for the flag. Good, Yuna said. Let them have it. Somin looked confused. But we need the flag to win. Eventually, Yuna agreed. But first we need them to wonder where we are. For the next 6 hours they did nothing. They sat in that cave, cold and wet and patient, while Jisu monitored the Draneth communications. Vexthor's warriors reached the flag easily, established a perimeter, and waited for the humans to attack. And waited, and waited. Through Jisu's equipment, they could hear the confusion growing in the enemy communications. Where are they? One warrior asked. Scan again, Vexthor ordered. They must be approaching, but the scans found nothing. No heat signatures, no movement, no communication signals. The humans had simply vanished. As night fell in the simulation, Vexthor's warriors made camp around the flag. They set up a secure perimeter with guards posted at regular intervals. It was textbook military procedure, exactly what Hyun had predicted they would do. Now? Minho asked eagerly. Now, Yuna confirmed. They split up, each taking a different approach to the camp. But they weren't going for the flag. They were going for everything else. Minho moved like a ghost through the darkness, reaching the spot where the warriors had stored their supplies. He didn't steal anything. That would be noticed. Instead, he carefully sabotaged it, a chemical compound in the water purification system, a small adjustment to the food storage that would let moisture in, a nearly invisible cut in several equipment packs. Nothing obvious, nothing immediate, just small problems that would grow. Jisoo found a place within range of their communication system and deployed a small device she'd built. It would randomly inject interference into their signals, not enough to block them, but enough to make them unreliable. Soman identified the plants around the camp that would cause skin irritation and carefully spread their pollen across the areas where the warriors would sit and sleep. Hyun set up false trails leading away from the camp, marking them with signs that the humans had been there, signs that would make the Dranith think they were being scouted, watched, hunted. And Yuna found their sensor net and memorized its exact pattern, so she would know how to slip through it later. By dawn, they were back in their cave, exhausted but undetected, and in the Dranith camp, small problems were beginning to appear. "Sir, the water tastes strange," one warrior reported. "Sir, my armor seal is damaged," another said. "Sir, I'm getting some kind of rash," a third complained. Vexthor frowned, studying his camp. "Run diagnostics on all equipment, and someone check the perimeter sensors. I want to know if anything came near this camp." But the sensors showed nothing, because technically, nothing had triggered them. The humans had been too careful, too patient. On the second night, Minho's sabotage began to work. 3 warriors developed severe stomach problems from the contaminated water. Their food started to spoil in the humid air. Equipment began to fail at random moments, and through it all, Jisoo's device kept corrupting their communications, making coordination harder. "This doesn't make sense," one of Vexthor's officers said, scratching at his irritated skin. "Equipment doesn't just fail like this, unless someone made it fail," Vexthor said slowly. He stood and addressed his warriors. "The humans are here somewhere. They're not fighting us directly. They're attacking our supplies, our equipment. Change of tactics. We split into hunting parties. We find them and eliminate them." Yun had predicted this too. "They'll abandon the defensive position and go on the offense," he'd told Yuna. "That's when they're most vulnerable." The warriors split into groups of 4 and began aggressive patrols through the jungle. They were skilled and dangerous, moving with the confidence of trained soldiers, but the humans weren't soldiers. They were survivors. Yuna's team led them on a chase through the densest parts of the jungle, through ravines and across streams, always staying just out of sight. They left traces, a footprint here, a broken branch there, enough to keep the Dranith following, but never enough to actually catch up. And while the warriors chased ghosts, exhaustion began to set in. The contaminated water had weakened several of them. The equipment failures were getting worse. The constant rain and humidity wore at their morale, and every night they heard sounds in the darkness, whispers, laughter, screams, sounds that Jisoo was broadcasting from her equipment, sounds recorded from Earth's horror movies and transmitted at frequencies that made them seem to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "This is psychological warfare," Vexthor realized on the 3rd day, his voice tight with frustration. "They're not trying to beat us in combat. They're trying to break our spirits." One of his warriors, a veteran named Korth, spoke up. "Sir, this is dishonorable. They hide and play tricks like children. They fight to win," Vexthor said quietly, and something in his voice had changed. He was beginning to understand. On the 4th night, the humans eliminated their first warrior. It wasn't through combat. It was through what appeared to be a local predator, one of Minho's remote-controlled drones disguised and programmed to attack. The warrior woke up outside the simulation, confused and angry, insisting he'd been killed by wildlife, not humans. But Vexthor knew better. "They're using everything," he told his remaining warriors. "The environment, our psychology, our expectations. They're not fighting our war. They're making us fight theirs." By the 5th day, Vexthor's force was down to 12 warriors. They were exhausted, paranoid, and starting to turn on each other. Arguments broke out over tactics. Warriors jumped at shadows. The cohesion that made them effective was crumbling, and in their cave, Yuna's team watched and waited, tired and scared but still together. "When do we go for the flag?" Soman asked. Yuna studied the tactical display that Hyun had created. "Soon, very soon. First, we need to make sure they're exactly where we want them." She looked at her team, these 5 unlikely warriors who had survived 4 days against an elite military unit without firing a single shot. Tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow we end this. Commander Doyen's office was small and practical, with a single window overlooking the training grounds. He waited until the door closed before turning to face Yuna. His expression was unreadable. "Do you understand what you've just done?" he asked quietly. Yuna stood at attention. "Yes, sir. I challenged General Vexthor to a wargame simulation." "You challenged one of the most powerful military leaders in the coalition," Doyen corrected. "A general who has never lost a battle. A warrior whose species has been perfecting combat for 10,000 years. He paused. Why? Yuna hesitated. How could she explain the feeling that had burned through her when Vexthor dismissed her people as primitive? How could she describe the weight of her grandmother's stories? The pride she felt in humanity's stubborn refusal to quit. "Because he was wrong, sir," she finally said. "And someone needed to prove it." Doyen studied her for a long moment, then he did something unexpected. He smiled. It was brief but genuine. "Your grandmother would be proud," he said, "and probably worried. I knew her, you know. She trained me when I first joined the military. Toughest instructor I ever had." His smile faded. "She also taught me that courage without preparation is just suicide. So let's talk about your team." Over the next hour, they discussed options. Yuna could choose 4 other cadets to join her, making a team of 5 against Vexthor's 20 warriors. The odds were terrible, but as Doyen pointed out, humans had won against worse odds before. "You'll need specialists," Doyen said, pulling up profiles on his screen. "People who think differently." Yuna looked at the list of available cadets and made her choices carefully. Not the strongest or the fastest, but the ones who understood how to think around problems instead of through them. First was Hyun. He was brilliant with tactics and strategy, able to see patterns that others missed. He was terrible at physical training and barely passed his combat tests, but his mind was like a tactical computer. When Yuna asked him to join the team, he stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "You want me?" he said, pushing his glasses up nervously. "Yuna, I can barely do 20 push-ups. Vexthor's warriors could break me in half." "I don't need you to fight them head-on," Yuna said. "I need you to help me outsmart them." Second was Jisoo, a communications expert who could hack almost any system. She was painfully shy and rarely spoke in class, but give her a computer and she became someone else entirely. When Yuna approached her, Jisoo's hands were shaking. "I've never been in combat," she whispered. "Not even simulation." "Good," Yuna said. "That means you haven't learned to think like everyone else yet." Third was Minho, an engineer who understood systems and machines better than people. He could build anything from spare parts and had a mind that thought in 3 dimensions. He agreed immediately, already thinking about what tools he could create. Fourth was Soman, a medical student who had joined the military academy to learn emergency field medicine. She was calm under pressure and had steady hands, but she'd never been in a combat situation. When Yuna asked her to join, Soman looked uncertain. "I'm a healer, not a fighter," she said. "Exactly," Yuna replied. "I need someone who thinks about keeping people alive, not killing them." When Vexthor heard about her choices, he laughed so hard that people could hear it 3 corridors away. The news spread through the academy like wildfire. The human girl had chosen the weakest cadets available, the misfits, the ones who couldn't pass basic combat training. "This will be over in an hour," Crix told anyone who would listen. Probably less. The academy's commandant, a stern alien called Ralvex, called both Yuna and Vexthor to his office. He was clearly unhappy. "This situation has become a diplomatic problem," he said, his 3 eyes blinking in sequence. "General, perhaps we could cancel this exercise. Call it a misunderstanding." "No," Vexthor said flatly. "The cadet accepted my challenge. I will not be seen backing down from a first-year human." "And you, Cadet Yuna?" Ralvex asked hopefully. "Surely you see that this has gotten out of hand." Yuna thought about it. She could back down, say it was a mistake. No one would really blame her. But then she thought about Vexthor's mocking laugh, his dismissal of everything humanity had fought for, his certainty that humans were nothing special. "I'm not backing down." "Sir," she said. Ralvex's middle eye twitched. "Very well, but I'm setting strict parameters. General, you will personally design the simulation scenario. Make it challenging but fair. The objective will be capture the flag. Full sensory immersion with pain feedback, but safety protocols remain active. No permanent damage, agreed," Vexthor said. "And when do we begin?" 1 week from today, Ralvex decided. That gives both teams time to prepare. General, you may use any of your soldiers currently stationed here. Cadet Yuna, you have your team. Use the next 7 days wisely. As they left the office, Vexthor stopped Yuna in the corridor. He looked down at her with those amber eyes, and for a moment his expression was almost curious. You know you're going to lose, he said. It wasn't mocking this time. Just factual. Maybe, Yuna admitted. But you're going to remember it. That night, Yuna gathered her team in an empty training room. The 5 of them stood in a small circle, looking nervous and uncertain. Salman kept fidgeting with her medical kit. Hyun was already reading tactical manuals on his tablet. Jisoo wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. Minho was sketching something on a piece of paper. Okay, Yuna said. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. We're going up against trained warriors with years of experience. They're stronger, faster, and better equipped than us. This is a terrible pep talk, Hyun muttered. Yuna smiled slightly. I'm not finished. Yes, they have all those advantages. But they also have expectations. They expect us to fight like they do. They expect us to follow the rules they know. They expect us to lose quickly and quietly. And we're not going to do that? Soman asked quietly. No, Yuna said firmly. We're going to fight like humans. We're going to be unpredictable, adaptable, and absolutely relentless. We're going to use every dirty trick, every advantage, every single thing we can think of, because that's what my grandmother taught me. When you're the underdog, you don't fight fair. You fight to win. Minho looked up from his sketching. What's the plan? First, we study them, Yuna said.
Hyun, I need you to research Dranith military tactics, everything. How they think, how they fight, what they expect.
Find their patterns, Hyun nodded, already taking notes. Jisoo, learn everything about the simulation systems. Every detail. If there's a way to use the environment or the systems themselves, I want to know about it. Jisoo's fingers were already flying across her keyboard. Minho, start thinking about tools we can make. Traps, distractions, anything that gives us an edge. Minho grinned. Now you're speaking my language. Sumin, study Dranith physiology. What hurts them? What scares them? What do they need to function? Soman nodded slowly. I can do that. And me? Yuna looked at each of them. I'm going to figure out how to turn our weaknesses into strengths. We have 1 week. We're going to use every second of it. Over the next 7 days, the 5 of them barely slept. They studied, practiced, and planned. Other cadets watched them with pity. The Academy's betting pools gave them odds of 1,000 to 1 against. Even sympathetic humans thought they were being foolish. But Yuna remembered her grandmother's final words to her before she died. Never let anyone tell you that surviving isn't enough, little one. In this universe, sometimes just surviving is the greatest victory of all. On the night before the simulation, Vexthor gave an interview to the Academy's news network. He was confident, almost cheerful. Tomorrow will be educational, he said. For everyone. The cadets will learn about real warfare. The Academy will learn why traditional military discipline matters. And perhaps the humans will learn some humility. Do you think you'll win easily? The interviewer asked. Vexthor's smile was sharp. I think it will be over so quickly that we might need to run the simulation twice to make it worth watching. In her small quarters, Yuna watched the interview with her team. When it ended, Hyun looked at her nervously. We're really doing this? He asked. Yuna thought about her grandmother, about Earth, about every human who'd ever faced impossible odds and survived anyway. Yes, she said. We're really doing this. And tomorrow, we're going to show the general what humans are really made of. The morning sun filtered through the massive transparent dome of the Galactic Military Academy, casting strange shadows across the classroom where 30 cadets sat in neat rows. Most of them weren't human. In fact, only 3 humans attended this particular class on advanced tactical warfare, and Yuna was the quietest of them all. She sat in the back row, her dark eyes focused on the holographic display at the front of the room. Her instructor, Commander Doyen, was explaining a famous battle from the Coalition War when the doors suddenly opened with a hiss. Every head turned. General Vexthor entered the room like a storm. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his reptilian body covered in dark scales that seemed to absorb light. His armor was decorated with medals from 40 conquered systems, and his eyes glowed with a faint amber light. Behind him marched 4 of his officers, equally imposing. Commander Doyen stopped mid-sentence and bowed slightly. General Vexthor, we weren't expecting you until this afternoon. I finished my inspection of the weapons facility early, Vexthor said, his voice deep and resonant. The translator chip in every cadet's ear made his words clear. I wanted to see what the Academy is teaching these days. Please continue. Doyen hesitated, then resumed his lecture. He was explaining how Earth's forces had held a critical position during the Coalition War 15 years ago. Buying time for the main fleet to regroup, it was one of humanity's proudest moments in space. The human battalion was outnumbered 5-1, Doyen explained, highlighting the tactical map. But they held the line for 72 hours using guerrilla tactics and Vexthor laughed. It was a harsh, grinding sound that made several cadets flinch. Forgive me, Commander, the general said, though his tone carried no apology. But calling that a tactical victory is generous. The humans hid in caves and threw rocks at their enemies. They survived through luck, not skill. The classroom went silent. Yuna felt her jaw tighten, but she remained still. Commander Doyen's face showed no emotion. With respect, General, the outcome speaks for itself, Doyen said carefully. Does it? Vexthor walked to the front of the room, his claws clicking on the floor. Let me tell you about real warfare. My people have been conquering systems for 10,000 years. We understand honor, strategy, formation. We fight face-to-face, warrior to warrior. He gestured dismissively at the hologram. What did humanity do before joining the coalition? You fought with chemical projectiles. You killed each other over invisible lines on your planet. You call that military experience? Several alien cadets shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a tall insectoid named Crix, nodded in agreement. The other two humans in the class, Hyun and Minho, looked down at their desks. Yuna's grandmother had fought in 3 wars on Earth. She had crawled through mud and blood to save her squad. She had gone weeks without food, watching friends die, and still completed her mission. Yuna remembered her weathered hands and the quiet strength in her voice when she told those stories. Her hand went up. Commander Doyen saw it, and something flickered in his eyes. Warning, maybe, or hope. Cadet Yuna? She stood slowly. Every eye in the room turned to her. She was small compared to most species here, barely 5'4", with her dark hair pulled back in a simple braid. But when she spoke, her voice was steady. General Vexthor, sir. With respect, I think you're wrong. The room's atmosphere changed instantly. Several cadets gasped. Crix made a clicking sound of disbelief. Vexthor turned his massive head to look at her, his amber eyes narrowing. Oh? His voice was dangerously soft. Please enlighten me, cadet. What could a first-year human possibly teach a general who has commanded fleets before your species left your planet? Yuna met his gaze without blinking. Her heart was pounding, but her voice stayed calm. You said humans fight with luck, not skill. But surviving against a stronger enemy isn't luck. It's adaptation. My people didn't have scales or claws or advanced weapons. We were weak. So we learned to fight in ways that didn't require strength. Hiding, Vexthor said flatly. Ambush, cowardice, strategy, Yuna corrected. Your people are warriors, General. I respect that. But humans are survivors. There's a difference. Vexthor's laugh came again, but this time it was colder. Survivors. How quaint. He walked toward her, his footsteps heavy. Tell me, little survivor, do you truly believe your primitive tactics would work against a trained military force? Against my soldiers? Yuna felt something shift in her chest. It was the same feeling she got when someone insulted her family, her home, her people, a quiet fire that turned her fear into focus. Try me, she said. The words came out soft, but they filled the room. The walls seemed to vibrate with them. Even Vexthor stopped walking, his head tilting slightly as if he'd heard something unexpected. Commander Doyen stood straighter. Several cadets leaned forward in their seats. Try you? Vexthor repeated slowly. Are you challenging me, cadet? I'm saying that maybe a demonstration would be better than a debate, Yuna said. You think human tactics are primitive. I think they're effective. Only one way to know for sure. The general stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, his mouth curved into something that might have been a smile on a human. On him it looked like a predator bearing teeth. Interesting, he said. Very interesting. Commander Doyen, does your academy have simulation facilities? Yes, General, Doyen said carefully. But I don't think... I propose a war game, Vexthor interrupted, his eyes never leaving Yuna. My elite unit against a human tactical team. Real simulation, full immersion, pain feedback enabled. We'll see how effective these survivor tactics truly are. General, our cadets aren't... Doyen began. I accept, Yuna said. Now Doyen did look worried. Cadet Yuna, this isn't... I accept, she repeated louder this time. If the general wants to see what humans can do, I'll show him. Bexthor's smile widened. Excellent. I'll have my 20 best warriors ready by week's end. Choose your team, little survivor. Choose carefully. I would hate for this to be too easy. He turned and walked toward the door, his officers following. As he reached the exit, he paused and looked back at her. 1 week of preparation, he said. Then we'll see whose methods are truly superior. I look forward to teaching you about real warfare, cadet. The door closed behind him with a heavy thud. The classroom erupted into whispers and shocked exclamations. Hyun turned to stare at Yuna with wide eyes. What did you just do? He whispered. Yuna sat down slowly, her legs suddenly shaky. What had she done? She'd just challenged one of the most decorated generals in the coalition to a military exercise. His 20 elite warriors against her team of cadets. Commander Doyen approached her desk. Cadet Yuna, my office, now. As she followed him out, Yuna caught her reflection in one of the windows. She looked pale and small, completely ordinary. But her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, telling her about the winter she'd spent in the mountains, fighting an enemy with better weapons, better supplies, better training. We won because they didn't understand us, her grandmother had said. They thought being stronger meant they'd win. They forgot that the human spirit is the hardest thing in the universe to break. Yuna took a deep breath. She had 1 week to prove that her grandmother was right.